I got a little PowerPoint presentation just to tell you a little bit about the Dragons and what I do. My job with the Dragons is kind of a 50-50 split between two different departments. My name again is Tom Nichols. Gary said get his name spelled correctly, so it's Nichols.
Got it.
Do you? All right. Congratulations. A little bit about me. First of all, I think back to when I was your age and thinking about what I wanted to do. And like Scott may have done at some point, I made a decision as a very young person that I wanted to be a sports broadcaster. And this goes back even probably to junior high school. Went to a high school like your high school that had a radio station and did all the prerequisite classes to become an announcer on the radio station and got that experience. Went to college. While I was in college, went to work for a small commercial station in my area and worked weekends running the board, as we say, board operator, which means you're the guy sitting in a dark, empty room while everybody else is out at the game having fun. You're the guy back at the radio station that's running the controls and playing the commercials and keeping the game on the air. I did that for really 4 years during college and came out of college, still wanted to become a sports broadcaster and did something that probably was not exactly my personality. I was kind of a quiet and shy person at that time. Not probably unlike many of you in this class, but I was kind of reserved, and I thought, you know, I want to get involved in baseball as a broadcaster. I'm not really sure what the first step is. So I made that first phone call to the announcer for a team that was about an hour away. And the announcer for that team was a gentleman by the name of Howard Kellman. He was with the Indianapolis Indians. He had been there. Howard Kellman's been the broadcaster for the Indianapolis Indians since 1974. And I came out of college, and I remember about February of 1988, I made a call to Howard, and I said, Howard, I've got experience in college, and I've gone through high school and college, and I broadcast. By that time, I probably broadcast between football and basketball and baseball, somewhere around 200 games. And I said, I'd like to figure out what I need to do to get involved in minor league baseball as a broadcaster. And he said, well, it's February, and it's a little late for this year. The season starts in April. But we do have an opening for about 25 games a season with our team right now. And if you want to send me a tape, we'll take a listen. And I sent him my tape at that time. This is going back a few years, of course. There were no CDs. There were no internet links. And Scott would tell you that at this time, if you send out an audition tape, you probably would send either an audio file or even more likely, probably just a link to a page on SoundCloud or something. And at that time, you sent out cassette tapes to the teams to listen to. So I sent him my cassette tape, and he listened to it, and he called me back, and he said, well, we'll tell you what, we'll give you one game to come down and do with us, and if it goes okay, we'll talk again. I did my one game, and he said at the end of the game, we've got some more games for you. And one thing led to another, and now that was 28 years ago, and I just finished my 28th year as a broadcaster in minor league baseball. So that's kind of how I've gotten to this point. Grew up in Muncie, Indiana, went to Ball State University, grew up as a Cincinnati Reds fan and listening to Marty Brenneman on WLW, and he also is still there to this day. So that's kind of how I got to this point. And my other half of my job with the Dragons is Director of Media Relations. So it's my job to get coverage for our team, not be the guy who does the coverage, but work with local newspaper, television, radio, and so forth to get coverage for our team. And I'll talk about that as I get to my presentation. Let's do a quick little slide presentation on the Dragons here. We have just finished our 16th season of minor league baseball in Dayton. First year for the team was 2000, very young in the lives of many of the students. Is anybody here that wasn't even born in 2000? Everybody here was born in 2000.
Yeah, we're all 90s babies.
Yeah, all right. All right. Well, the Dragons opened up in the year 2000. Had our first game that year. Our first team was actually one of our most famous teams ever. We had two very well-known players on that first team. One of them was a young 19-year-old power hitter named Adam Dunn. He went on to play in the major leagues for a long time. In fact, became one of the top 50 home run hitters in Major League Baseball history. He was on our team in the year 2000. And we have actually, as I look at this slide here, 1,121 consecutive sold-out dates. That represents every game in our history. Every game we've ever played has been a sold-out date at Fifth Third Field. This past season, we finished 8th in minor league baseball in attendance out of 160 teams. We've drawn over 8.5 million fans through our turnstiles, and we've led single A and double A baseball in attendance for a number of years throughout the nation. Our sellout streak of 1,121 consecutive dates is the all-time record for North American history in sports. Anywhere in North America, that's the all-time record. We broke the record in 2011. When we broke the record, it was held by the Portland Trail Blazers, 814 consecutive sold-out dates in 2011. We broke that record, and you can see some of the other teams on this list here are big-time, top-level major league teams. For example, number 5 on the list there is the Chicago Bulls from 87 to 2000. Who was the Bulls' marquee player at that time? Michael Jordan. Yep, that's right. They had 610 consecutive sold-out dates. The Boston Celtics, 1980 to 95. Anybody know who their marquee player was during that time?
Bird.
Larry Bird, that's right. The Trailblazers didn't really necessarily have one particular player that was a Hall of Fame quality player like those guys. The Boston Red Sox surpassed the Trailblazers after we did, and their streak ended in 2013 at 820 consecutive sold-out dates. Our streak, by the way, is still going, so we'll go into next year with that 1,121 consecutive sold-out dates, and that's still going. You got a question?
Out of all professional sports, Dayton Dragons in the entire United States is the #1 streak.
That's correct.
Wow.
Right, professional or college. Now, it's much more difficult for a college team to have a sellout streak because they just don't play any, or a football team because you've only got, 10 games a year. But for a baseball team or a basketball team or a hockey team, you could put up numbers like this. So the Dayton Dragons have the longest sellout streak in North American sports history. These are some of our former Dragons players who have played with the Dragons on the way up through the farm system. These are all well-known Reds players who are currently, right now, still with the Reds. Jay Bruce has been with the Reds since 2008, played with the Dragons in 2006. Homer Bailey's thrown 2 no-hitters in the major leagues. He was with us in 2005. Joey Votto's the Reds' big-name player right now, former National League Most Valuable Player, actually spent 2 years with the Dragons. He came in 2003, wasn't at that particular time a strong player, came back the next year much better, and was on his way. And Todd Frazier was with us in 2008, won the All-Star Game Home Run Derby this year, and current member of the Reds. We have also, this is something that Scott's real familiar with because he gets about as many in Columbus as we do in Dayton, what we call Major League Injury Rehab Assignments. These are, it's unique to baseball really. For example, if an Ohio State football player goes on to the NFL, is injured in the National Football League with, say, the Oakland Raiders. He's about ready to come back off his injury. He doesn't go back and play for Ohio State again to get him ready to play. That happens in baseball. We have a major league player that's injured and needs to get a few live game at-bats or innings if he's a pitcher. He'll come back and play in the minor leagues again. And we had Brandon Phillips, the Reds second baseman, and Aroldis Chapman, Reds relief pitcher, came back and played for us as well. Again, unique to baseball in that you actually have major leaguers who'll come back and play for the minor league team years after they've been in the big leagues on injury rehab assignment. And it's great for our fans to see a guy in a Dragons uniform actually pitching in one of our games who is an established current major league player. Now, Dragons baseball, if you've been to a game, you've seen it's much more than just baseball. Really, the key to our success has been not so much the baseball part of it, but the fact that our owners pick the correct target market. If you've been to a Dragons game, it's all about family entertainment. When I say target market, every company in America has a target market. Whatever they're trying to sell, there is some group based on demographics that their company has to be able to sell their product to be successful. That group may be based on age, it may be based on income level, it may be based on some personal interest, but every company has some demographic group that they've got to be able to reach to be successful. Now, what's the Dragons' target market? What's our demographic group? That's correct. Good guess. Families is our demographic group. It's our target market. For us to be successful, we try to appeal to families. So not necessarily baseball fans or maybe men of a certain age who appreciate baseball as some people might have expected it would be, but families, parents and their kids, grandparents and their grandkids. That's really what Dragons baseball in many ways is all about. So we have, as you see here in this slide, many of our mascots. To the far left there is our primary mascot, Heater. To the upper right, you guessed this one, Jim. What's your name, by the way? Brian. Guessed Jim. Lower right, that Cyclops character, we call that character Wink. Thank you. Lower left is that superhero-looking character. Anybody know what we call him? Have you seen him? Roofman is correct. And then some of the other slides also are examples of things we do. You've got the T-shirt toss there on the left. We do different things during the game on the field. Now, baseball's unique and it's really good for what we try to do in that you've got inning breaks. Every half inning, 3 outs. Pitcher comes off, one team comes off the field, other team goes on. Pitcher gets his 8 warm-up pitches. That gives us 90 seconds to do something on the field to entertain the fans, whether they're a big baseball fan or not a baseball fan at all. So if the game's going on, we have that inning break. When Scott's broadcasting in Columbus or I'm broadcasting with the Dragons, we take commercial break. We take a 90-second commercial break. Fans in the audience, they can't take a commercial break. So it gives us 90 seconds to do something on the field to entertain everyone at the game, whether they're a big baseball fan like myself, and I watch a game and I'm trying to predict which players are going to be future Reds players. But if you're not a baseball fan, you may come to a game and someone says, "What'd you do tonight?" "I went to a Dragons game." "Who won?" "I don't know, but I still had a great time." That's kind of the idea, is that you're going to entertain everyone in the ballpark, whether they're a big baseball fan or not a fan at all. So on the field during inning breaks, we'll have contests, sing-alongs, skits, these types of things that we'll do to entertain everyone. This is the Cincinnati Reds farm system. The Dragons are one of 6 farm clubs. If you sign a contract with the Cincinnati Reds, we actually get this question from time to time. How do I try out for the Dragons? I was a good baseball player in high school or college, and I'd like to try out for the Dragons. And we say, well, it really doesn't work that way. You can't try out for the Dragons. You've got to try out for the Reds. And they have scouts. They will find you, or they actually have tryout camps. Occasionally, they'll sign a player out of a tryout camp as an undrafted free agent, and they will send you to one of what we call rookie-level clubs. The Reds have 2 rookie-level clubs. They'll start you out at their team, and if you look on this map, out in Phoenix, Arizona, a suburb of Phoenix, Goodyear, Arizona. You'll play there as an 18 or 19-year-old. If you do well there, you'll move up to the next rookie-level club up in Billings, Montana, the Billings Mustangs. If you do well in Billings, you'll go to Single A and play for the Dayton Dragons in Dayton, Ohio. If you play well in Dayton, you'll move up to the next club, which is down in Daytona Beach, Florida, the Daytona Tortugas. That's a Spanish name for turtle. Yes.
So it's like single A, double A, triple A.
That's correct, although Daytona is also a single A club. They're what we call advanced single A. So you'll go from Goodyear to Billings to Dayton to Daytona, and then you'll move up one more level to double A and go to Pensacola, Florida. The name of the team there is the Pensacola Blue Wahoos. And you'll move to, that's a double A club. Then you'll move on to triple A if you do well there, and go to Louisville, Kentucky and play for the Louisville Bats. And if you do well in Louisville, you'll move up to the major leagues and play for the Reds. Now notice I said at each level, if you do well, because only about 10% of all players signed will ever make it to the major leagues. Now they don't tell you at the beginning which 10% are going to make it, of course. So every player hopes he's in that small group who will eventually someday reach the major leagues. This is our league. I'll flash through these next couple quickly. This is our league. It's called the Midwest League. 16 teams. Starts to the far west in the state of Iowa. We've got teams in Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, Kentucky, and Ohio. 16 teams in our league. Skip through this one. Our team bus is, you may see it on the road some point. This is our home away from home. We do all of our travel by bus. Now, Scott in Columbus, you guys fly some of your trips, and you also have, I know, some trips where you bus. Yep, we do all of our trips. He's in AAA, I'm in single A. In single A, you do all of your trips by bus. Nice bus, DVD player, prompts some arguments at times over whether the movie is good enough to have on the DVD player or should be taken out and replaced by something better. Although I noticed, and Scott may have noticed this too, in the last year or two, not as much use of the bus DVD player as players have their own iPads and different, they've downloaded movies off of Netflix, and so the mornings where you leave Dayton at 8 a.m. for a game in Iowa, and you get on the bus at 8 a.m. after you got to bed at midnight or 1 a.m. the night before, and the last thing you want to have is some movie blasting in the speakers above you with gunfire, but that'll happen. And I've noticed in the last couple of years, not as many of those movie buses as players have their own movies that they bring on the bus to watch. That's technology. It's DVD. When I first got into minor league baseball, it was a VCR, so that's what it's changed over the years.
I don't know if your bus has Wi-Fi, but
we do.
If you end up with a bus that has Wi-Fi on it, then everybody's jamming it up, trying to stream stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. We actually try to keep the players from. We don't give the password to the players. We just give it to the coaches and the staff, so we can do our thing. But the players don't have access. They don't get it.
You'll get the Wi-Fi when you hit AAA.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And this is the ballpark, Fifth Third Field. Great minor league stadium. Again, the ballpark built in 2000. Still looks new to this day, but it's going into its 17th year, and it's our home. Again, one of the finest minor league facilities, I think, in the nation. So that is kind of my slide presentation. I'm going to move into some other areas and talk about my job with the Dragons. Any questions so far, by the way, about anything I've talked about? Just kind of giving you an overview of the Dayton Dragons and who the team is, what they've done, and I'm going to go specifically into my job and talk about what I do. We televise 25 games per season locally, and we broadcast the rest on radio. Actually, we broadcast every game home and road on radio, 140 games a year. So when we're not televising, I'm doing the radio broadcast on 980 AM WONE radio, and also via the internet. The internet's a great thing. Now, if I go back to my early years of broadcasting, let's go back to about 1990, 91, when I was a young broadcaster, and we would, if we were on the road, we would get off the team bus, and we'd get back to the hotel, and the players would all form lines at these crazy things that I don't know if people even use them anymore in the hotel. They're what we used to call payphones. And players would form lines at the payphones, and they would call home to mom and dad and tell them what happened in the game that night. And that would be the first the parents had heard of what happened that particular game that evening. Is player would call home to his mom, who may be who knows where, because our players are international actually and from all over the United States. And player would call home, tell mom and dad what happened. Now, of course, that was 1991, 92. Now, by the time I get on the bus after the game's over, and after the game's over, I'll do my post-game show on radio. Takes about 15 minutes, and then I'll finish my game story. It's also my job to write the game story each night after the game, and I'll finish that, and I'll email it out to our media list, which includes all the television stations, newspaper, website, bloggers, and so forth, in the Dayton market. I'll put it up on our website, and I'll pack my stuff up, and I'll get on the bus. By the time I get down to the bus will be about half full of players, and they'll be on their cell phones talking to their parents, instead of telling their parents what happened during the game, they'll be getting questions from their parents about different things that happened to their game because their parents watch the game on the internet or listen to the game on radio. So different world entirely now. The guy sitting behind me on the bus will be having a conversation with his dad about something that his dad heard me describe on the radio broadcast, and he'll be sitting right behind me on the bus on his cell phone talking to his father. Much different than, in the early days when I would get off the bus and guys would make a beeline for the payphone. But that's a difference. So we do 140 games on radio, all home and road games, and that's my primary job as far as broadcasting. But we also televise 25 games per season locally. The games are televised. We've got a big crew. We made a big upgrade to our TV broadcast for this past season. I'll talk about, I know that's an area that's interesting to some of you is the TV side. I'll talk about that and talk about some of the positions on the crew in a second here. But we televise 25 games a year locally over the air on WHIO 7.2, which is on the Time Warner cable on 23 and 372. So you can get it if you're a DirecTV customer or don't have cable. You could get it over the air with just rabbit ears antenna plugged into the back of your TV, which is what I do because I'm DirecTV. Or you can get it off of Time Warner cable on channel 23 or 372. Our game broadcasts, we really made a big upgrade this past season. I've been with the team for 8 years, and they've gotten a little bit better every year. Some of the positions on our crew now would include 6 camera operators, first base dugout, third base dugout, center field, a roving camera operator, and a couple other camera operators as well. We have a director, of course, a technical director who's running the switcher. We have a replay operator so that if we have a good play or a controversial call by an umpire, we can take a second or third or fourth look at that play from multiple different camera angles. We have a graphics operator. His job is to enter in things like the starting lineups, the standings, the defensive chart, any text I give him prior to each game. Let's say a player has a 12-game hitting streak. When he comes up to bat, we'll bring up that graphic that shows over his last 12 games, he's got a hitting streak and he's hitting 378 over his hitting streak. Standings, league standings, things along these lines. All those things are entered by the graphics operator. There's also a person called a shader. His job is to keep all the cameras looking correct over the course of the 3-hour broadcast. As it gets darker and darker and the camera operator is trying to adjust his camera, the shader will keep all the cameras looking good, looking consistent over the course of the 3-hour broadcast. As the level of light in the ballpark changes, the camera operator will adjust that as well. Let's see, I think that's all the positions on our crew. So we've got high quality graphics. It's a nice broadcast, and if you haven't ever seen one, I encourage you to take a look sometime. And we've upgraded it to a high level and feel pretty good about where we are with the TV broadcast. So that from a broadcasting side, that's what I do. Now again, from the media relations side, which is the other 50% of my job, what do I do for the team? Well, again, it's my job to try to generate coverage for our team. So whether it's coverage on newspaper, television, radio, or a blogger, it's my job to try to take stories to the media and get them to do stories on our team. Whether it's a player feature story or a human interest story about an event going on at the ballpark, any of those things, our organization really stresses heavy, aggressive work with the media. And if you go to work in a media relations positions for a sports team, I always try to liken the position to something along the lines of a flight attendant. You're doing everything you can to help make his job or her job easier. So if someone comes to our game and wants to do a story on one of our players or a story on an event going on at the ballpark, it's my job as Director of Media Relations to do everything I can to make that person's job easier to do that story. Whether that's having a player available at a certain time for an interview or just doing little things in the press box, providing statistics and notes, anything I can think of to try to make that person's job easier. So we look at it as, again, they're doing something to provide us with basically what amounts to free advertising. So we'll do everything we can to try to make that person's job easier to cover our team. We would never look at it as an annoyance or extra work or a hindrance or anything along those lines. We encourage coverage of our team. So if somebody shows an interest in doing a story on the Dragons, our first words are going to be, well, what can we do to help you make that process easier? So that's part of what we do. I want to go through some of the different areas of our staff and talk about, if you work for the Dragons, some different jobs you could possibly have with the Dayton Dragons. First of all, entertainment. We have approximately 10 full-time employees with the Dragons in entertainment. Now, you might work in the press box running some of the equipment upstairs, video or audio equipment. You could be, this is just, again, I'm just talking about the entertainment part of our staff. You might be the stadium public address announcer, the music operator. You might be down in the field as a member of the green team. Some of you familiar with our green team? They're the group of, usually they're like late high school, college age students who facilitate the skits and the sing-alongs and the contests that go on the field during the course of the game. There's about, they're not full-time, but there's probably about 10 members of the green team who work at the game. Mascots. There's someone in that mascot costume. We downplay the fact that there's actually a person in there. We never mention that really publicly, that there's a person in that costume, but of course there is. It's not a real character, although we try to keep kids from really thinking of it that way. So we've got 6 mascots, and each of them has a person that's trained on, usually most of those people have worked a summer at Disney World. And they've been trained on being a mascot. You might say, well, that sounds kind of crazy, but that's part of Dragons baseball. Is you want that person to be entertaining and appropriately in terms of actions as a mascot. We have an in-house advertising agency, so that any of our, let's say a brochure that our salespeople want to go out with, a ticket sales brochure, or a group ticket brochure that we can take out and present to a possible client. We have an in-house advertising agency with a talented graphic design crew, and their job is going to be to use Photoshop or whatever program they may use and produce a very attractive, full-color graphic design brochure that we can take out and use for our clients. Those are some of the different, and also, by the way, also the in-house advertising agency, they also produce our commercials that run on local television, radio, or on the scoreboard, or anywhere else that we may have. That's part of their job as well. Other areas of our staff, there's stadium operations. Stadium operations would include everything from the ushers to the grounds crew. Believe it or not, our groundskeeper has a college degree in turf management. You might have said, well, I didn't realize he did more than just mow the grass. Well, he's a very talented person. When you think about how difficult it must be over a course of 70 home games with 90+ degree temperatures and all the foot traffic on the field, and his job is to keep the field looking perfect, almost like a golf course putting green over a course of 5 months. And he measures all the things that go into keeping the grass looking perfect over the course of a season. And again, he's actually got a college degree in turf management where he learned how to maintain a field. Ticketing, season tickets, single game tickets, group tickets. We've got people on our staff that do a lot of work in terms of ticket sales. I mentioned media relations, broadcasting, community relations. If you are a minor league sports franchise, if you ever go to work in minor league sports, you'll learn the importance of connecting with your local community. And that means programs with the schools. We have something called the Dragons MVP program, where our players go out and they speak to 4th and 5th grade classrooms. Has anybody here ever, when you were in 4th or 5th grade, had a Dragons player? You did? That's nice. Dragons player came and spoke to your classroom. But also within those classrooms, there's different programs going on, where the teacher in each class selects a classroom MVP, and that student is brought to a Dragons game and given kind of a VIP experience with the student's family as well. Again, these are ways to reach out to the community, and so that you're not just a baseball team, but you're actually an active member of the community. Very important. And then merchandising. We have a gift shop on the property. We sell different hats, T-shirts, sweatshirts, all types of Dragons apparel, anything you might imagine. It's basically a retail store. We have a store manager. So all these different areas are different people who work for a baseball team. So you might have thought, well, my interest is in graphic design or it's in video production. I would never have thought that there's a spot for me with a minor league baseball team. Well, we've got all those positions. Turf management, as I mentioned, retail merchandising. All these things are part of the Dragons operation. So those are some of the different jobs that you might have as a member of the Dragons operation. We have about 40 full-time staff members year-round, 40 people who work for the Dragons in the office over the course of the year. Plus, that doesn't include game day staff who come out just for the game. We probably have 200 or 300 game day staff that are part-time workers that come out just for game nights. Any questions so far anybody has at all? Anything I've touched on? Anything? All right, I'm going to go into some different qualities that I feel are important for working in sports, and really most of these are they're important for any job you might take once you go into the workforce. I can remember quite well when I was the age that all of you are, and I was thinking about my future. And you never know exactly what path you may be drawn to. My intentions were to become a broadcaster, and that's the path I stayed on. I didn't really stray from that at all. But for many people, as you get older and you learn new things, your interests change. And some of you may say, well, you know, what I thought was my primary interest, I found out some other areas that became even more interesting to me, so I kind of changed gears a little bit. A lot of students even enter college with a major, and over the course of their college career, they may change their major, or they may even come out of college and get that first job in an area that is totally unrelated to what they majored in. It happens. And in fact, it happens all the time. But I'm going to give you a few ideas of things that over my career I've looked at and said, you know what? Those are some of the most important qualities that I really see. Now, I've been doing these speeches for a long time, and I've kind of, in recent years, I've changed the number one quality on the list. I used to have a list 1 through 5 or 1 through 6. And I realized at some point, you know, something I don't even have on my list really should be number one. Number one quality on my list for success in the workplace is ambition. You've got to have a drive and a dream to accomplish something. If you don't have that, you'll probably just kind of meander through your next few years, not quite knowing which way to go. But if you've got a dream and a drive behind it, ambition, you know you want to make something of your life, and it's pushing you to do things that you may not want to do. Now, going to college it's not always the easiest thing. Getting up for that 8 a.m. class in the morning when no one's going to know you went or didn't go except for you and your grade point average. That's about it. No one else is going to know that you didn't go to class except for you. But something tells you, you know what? I need to make the full effort here. I need to make sure that I give my best, because that's what it's going to take to be successful in life. It's that level of ambition, that drive that pushes you harder than most anyone else. And that's the number one item, in my opinion. Number two on my list, as far as skills and qualities, attitude. Kind of related to ambition, but different in many ways. Attitude, because in our office, for example, you could be a person with above average work skills, but if you're a person with a bad attitude, our boss, Bob Murphy, he will get you out of there. He will not have you around long at all with a bad attitude. Even if you're an above average worker, if you're the type of person that's kind of always looking at the glass as half empty instead of half full, just give the impression that you're a complainer. You don't really want to work there. You want someone else's job besides the job you have. You think you should have someone else's job. Or just generally bringing other people down in the office, the kind of person that you might call a kind of a cancer in the office, just constantly complaining or pointing out things that you don't like, you wish were different or better. That's a person with a bad attitude. I see this all the time when I go to, just like, let's say, take example would be like a Walmart. And you go up and you pay for your items, you go up to the register at the end, and what are they trained to say to you? What's the first thing they're trained to say to you? How you doing? How you doing? Right. And I always say, I'm doing great, even if I'm having a terrible day. Say, I'm doing great. How are you doing? They haven't been trained on how to answer that question. What should they say? No matter what, no matter how, I'm the customer, I'm the one making the money, bringing the money in. That's right. No matter if the previous person spilled milk all over their register or criticized them for not giving them the right coupon or whatever. They should never, that's not their job to relay that on to the customer. Their job is to be positive. But what do you hear a lot of times? You'll hear somebody say, I'm okay. I'm off work in about 20 minutes, so I'm happy about that. Whatever. You don't want to hear any of those things. Your job is to be positive, even if you're having the worst day you've had since you worked there. So that's the difference between the customer doesn't want to hear or care that you are having a bad day. So that's the difference between a person with a good attitude and someone who's got some work to do on their attitude. So attitude for me, very important. Some other important skills, and certainly in our line of work, communication skills are big. When I say communication skills, verbal and written. In my particular line of work, you've got to be able to write. And that doesn't mean you have to be able to write creative essays that would go in the New York Times, but you've got to be able to write intelligently. You've got to be able to write letters to season ticket holders, press releases, game stories without mistakes, without run-on sentences, without sentence fragments, without using the wrong tense. That English class that you've taken, you've got to be able to soak that in. You have to have good writing skills to work in minor league baseball and media relations or any job where you're writing to clients, customers, and so forth. And then communication skills. You've got to be able to have a conversation with someone and be a good representative of your company, whether that means answering questions or explaining something. How many times have you gone to, let's say, a Lowe's or a Home Depot or a Menards and had a question for someone, and that person needs to have communication skills, be able to answer the question and sound intelligent, sound like a good representative of the company. So I really look at those things. Communication skills, written and verbal. Some other things, of course, work ethic, very important. What is work ethic? Well, I think to me it's being willing to do whatever it takes to get the job done right. Not shortcutting, not looking and saying, well, I don't really have this done the way it should be, but it's 5 o'clock, so it's time for me to go home. The company will see that right away, and they'll say, well, that person really isn't too committed to making sure the job's done right. That person's committed to getting out of here when the clock says it's time to go. A person who really shows that commitment to say, I don't care about anything else, but I'm going to do my job and make sure it's done right, that person will stand out to the supervisor or boss. And they'll notice that fairly quickly. And you'll be rewarded eventually with, again, more responsibility, promotions, things along those lines. A person that stands out for just being willing to do whatever it takes to get the job done. How are we doing on time here?
Good.
Okay. Okay. All right. The next one I would say is just responsibility. And this is one that really separates, for me, I work a lot with students coming right out of college. And responsibility is the one that's a great separator. If I give my assistant, for example, a project that I say, I need this done in 1 week, and he or she gets to a point where he or she runs into a hurdle, and at the end of that week, I say, okay, I need the project now. I expect the project to be finished. If the student ran into a hurdle at some point, I expected the students who have come to me and done what? That's right. Said, hey, I am having trouble with this part of this. I am not quite sure what to do. What should I do? And I say, okay, let's take a look at that. Let's sit down and we'll figure out how to get past that hurdle. Not at the end when the project is due saying, well, I really couldn't, I didn't have this, or I didn't really have what I needed, or I couldn't get past this point, and I didn't get it done. That's the difference a lot of times between someone who's responsible and can be trusted. And if I tell someone I need this done and it's not done, it's going to cause me a problem probably, because I'm not going to ask somebody to do work just to make work for them. So my assistant really will separate himself or herself based on how responsible they are. When I ask for something to be done, it needs to be done at the deadline. Or person should have come to me before the deadline and said, I'm having trouble with this. Computer skills. That's the first one that's more of a specific skill, more so than like an intangible quality. When I talk about computer skills, for us, if you've got a computer skill, example would be Photoshop. How many people here have some skills in Photoshop? Oh, that's excellent. When I was in school, of course, no one had ever heard of Photoshop. So if you can do some things in Photoshop, just basic things, resizing photos and laying photos out with text, that gives you a skill that someone else may not have. Other programs that we use, InDesign. Does anybody here use InDesign, or have you heard of InDesign? We use that quite a bit in our department. So those are some computer skills. And again, I bring that one up for one real big reason, and that is, if I could give you one understanding, it's understand how competitive the job market is out there. How competitive it is. For every good job, there's 10 people that want that job. There's 10 people applying for that job. Some will never get interviews. A few of the 10 will be interviewed for that job based on their resume or connections they may have, networking they may have done. A few of the 10 will get interviews, and one person will get the job. So for every good job, there's 10 people that want that job. There's a myth that if you come through school and you make good grades, you're automatically qualifying yourself for a great high-paying job at the end of high school or college. No. Yeah, it doesn't work that way, unfortunately, because there's too many people that want those jobs. You've got to understand how competitive the job market really is. So how do you attack that? You make yourself stand out in some way from the other 9. Some skill, quality you have that makes your resume stand out from the other 9. Something you have that gives you an edge or an advantage on the other 9 that want that particular job. And again, some of these things I've talked about, having some specific computer skills, having experience in that area, even if it's part-time, while you're still in school. I would encourage you, you're about to start college in many cases, get some experience in your field while you're still in college. You'll come out of college with a resume that has experience. Again, that's going to give you an edge, an advantage on the others who may come out of college and just have the college degree. Look for ways where you can generate an advantage or an edge on the competition. And the competition, who's the competition? Students sitting right next to you in your college class that want the same job you want. You'll see that as you get into your college major, a lot of those students are going to be the same people that want the same job. Now, Scott and I, we went into a field, you talk about competition. There are probably in the United States, maybe 100, 120 full-time minor league baseball broadcast positions out of the entire 50 states. And I know this because I'm getting resumes right now and letters and emails. Every year, you know, there's many, many students coming out of college that want those jobs. Now, Scott and I both would, I'm sure he would say the same thing I would, and that's it. There's some luck involved. Both of us happen to meet the right person or the right situation at the right time that allowed us to get our foot in the door, because that first job is always the hardest one to get. You don't have any experience at all, really. You've not proven yourself yet. You get that first job, then you've got something to work off of that'll lead to the second job or the third job or the fourth job, each one hopefully being a promotion from the one before. Any questions so far? I think that's probably going to just about wrap up that part of what I have to talk about today. And I know you had some questions. Yes?
Before we get to the questions.
Okay.
You had mentioned that a student like these students
Yes.
that was sitting in this class a number of years ago.
That's correct.
And heard your talk in a class that happened to be on the Sinclair campus.
That's right.
Got a job at the Dragon.
That's correct. I have been doing this with Gary for 6 or 7 years, I guess, maybe 8 years. And I've done this 2 or 3 times per year. And over the course of the years, I've talked to a lot of students. And years ago, I spoke to one of Gary's classes, and there was a young lady in the class. And she, a couple of years later, showed me the, I guess you asked her to do a press release on the speech, on the presentation that I gave. She showed me her press release. I said, "You were in that class?" And yeah, she eventually came to work for the Dragons and was with us for 4 or 5 years as our graphic designer. So she went from being in the class I was speaking to being just down the hallway from where I'm at work for several years, and I worked with her closely on many projects. Very talented graphic design person, and she designed our game program and many of our other projects. So that you never know how things are going to work. Any questions? What's that?
Is your job like really, really hard, or are you just used to it because you've been doing it?
To me, hard would be manual labor, hard work, you know, that type of thing. It's busy. It's stressful, but at the same time, if you can, and I really should have mentioned this probably before. When you think about the job you're going to go into, I would look for a couple of different qualities in that job. Number one, something that you think you would enjoy doing. If you have a job that you don't actually like, every day you get up in the morning and you go to work and it's just dreadful. You just don't want to do it. You go through the weekend thinking, Monday, here it comes. No matter how much that job pays, you're not going to be a happy person. Look for a job that has something that you think you would like to do. That's part of it. And I'm fortunate to have that. I get to announce baseball for a living. And who wouldn't enjoy that if you're a sports fan? So that's a big part of it. Second thing I would look for in a job is, quite honestly, look for something that you have some particular skills in or can develop skills in that area. So in other words, I could not have taken a job as a guitar player, because no matter how hard I tried, that would have been a disaster. I had never been able to be a skilled person. Look for something that someone's told you at some point, or you believe, or you can develop some skills in that job. And if something that basically someone's told you, hey, you're pretty good at that. You do that pretty well. And again, that will help. Having the skill level to do a job not only will allow you to keep the job, but hopefully will allow you to build on that job. And no one takes, generally, I shouldn't say no one, most people don't take a job with the intention of just taking one job and saying, I'm going to stay with this company and doing the one thing I'm doing right now for the rest of my life and retire at the age of 66 and never have changed jobs. The idea is you build on the job you take, you get promotions, you make more money as you move up, and again, things change as you get older, people have families, and your priorities change a little bit. I never would have said when I was 20 years old that I wanted to be a minor league baseball broadcaster. What would I have said? I said I want to be a major league baseball broadcaster. But as you get older and your priorities start changing, I got to a point where I knew that was something that was fine with me. What I had was good enough. And I had no qualms at all about maintaining that particular career path, and enjoyed it. Again, as you get older, your priorities will change a little bit. You may have family come along, spouse, these types of things, and it just changes your perspective a little bit on what had been your preferred career path. So that'll happen with most everyone. But again, the idea, if you've got some skills in that particular area, it's going to help you maintain the position and build on the position to move up the ladder of the company, or maybe in some cases you may have to change companies. But that's what people do. Yes, Gary?
Tom, you shared with other classes too the growing issue of language, foreign language,
Right.
understanding foreign language. Would seem that in particularly minor league baseball,
Right.
maybe a third to half of the staff, players at least, are Latin American.
That's
South
correct.
America, or-
Yeah, I don't know how. Thank you for catching me on that, because I have that on my list. Somehow I skipped over it. I always encourage people to take as much Spanish as you can while you're in school. If I could speak Spanish, I would be able to communicate with a third of our players. A third of our players are Spanish-speaking players. And not just in baseball, but the world in general. I mean, statistics show that as we look 20, 30 years into the future, a much higher percentage of population is going to be Spanish-speaking. So think of all the jobs that if you can speak Spanish and communicate. I'll give you a very good example on our staff right now. A person that being able to speak Spanish helps that person have that job. That's our team trainer who treats the injuries. He can talk to the player in the player's language and get an idea where does it hurt? Sprains an ankle. How does this feel? And speak to the player in Spanish. Being able to speak Spanish to that person has helped that person get that job and maintain that job. And that's just one example. Many, many examples. So I definitely encourage, and if it's not Spanish, maybe a different language, because just, again, it gives you something I touched on earlier. It gives you an edge and an advantage over the competition. Being bilingual or multilingual is something that the other people that apply for that same job you may not have. Look for ways to become someone who looks better on paper, things you can have on your resume, skills you have that someone else may not have. It'll help you in the future and pay off many times over. So if I had to do over again, and I said, what would be one study that I would have gone into, one just field of study, I would have taken every Spanish class I could in high school and college. And I would have used that to my advantage. Any other questions? Yes? Yep. I'll give you my typical day during the season. My day during the off season, which is now, is much different. It's 9 to 5. But during the season, I'm going to show up in the office at about right at noon every day. You might say, well, you got to sleep in. Well, when I get to the end of the day, you'll see why it's noon. But I'm going to arrive each day at noon. First thing I'm going to do in the office is check emails, although in this day and age now, most of us have a smartphone, and so even if I get an email at 9 a.m. that's important, I'm probably going to respond to that right away. But I'm going to check email when I get to work. I'm going to check voicemail. Then I'm going to immediately begin to work on what we call our game notes package. It's about a 12 to 15 page packet of information that the media uses each day to cover the game. And it's my job to produce a 12 to 15 page packet of press box notes each day. It takes me about an hour and 15 minutes to do that packet. So I'll do that each day. That'll be the first thing I'll do. The next thing I'll do will be maybe reach out to any media about any upcoming story ideas we may have. Let's say, for example, we do a lot of this related to our games, as I talked about earlier. Other events we may have related to Dragons games that might not necessarily be just the baseball game. Let's say we've got a military appreciation night. Well, I'm going to write a press release about that particular night. I'm going to call the local media, TV stations, explain to them what's going on, send them the press release, and try to get them to come out and cover that event. That's what I'll do at that point in the day. There may be some other production work that I do. Get to about 3 o'clock, you start to change hats a little bit, start preparation for that night's broadcast. talking to coaches, talking to players, coming up with anecdotes that you can use during your broadcast, researching any statistics on the players that night, looking up the starting pitcher for the opposing team and Googling his name, trying to find out any interesting tidbits on that guy I can come up with that I can use during the broadcast. I'll do my pregame radio interview on tape. I'll go down to the locker room and talk to a player or coach. I'll put my lineup in the scorebook with all the stats in the scorebook as well. That'll take us to about 6 o'clock. I'll have a quick dinner, go on the air at 6:30 with the pregame show, 30-minute pregame from 6:30 to 7. Game will go from about 7 to, let's say, 9:45-ish. Post-game show will take another 15, 20 minutes, so that'll take us to about 10, let's say 10:15. Then again, I'll write the game story, send it out to all the media, post it to our website, check any emails that have come in during the course of the game, any other projects that have come up during the course of the game that I need to be aware of for the next day, and then leave the ballpark. Hopefully we didn't have a rain delay or anything along those lines that day, or extra innings. So I'll get out of the ballpark usually by midnight. So I'm there from 12 to midnight, so 12 hours. So people give me a hard time once in a while about coming in at noon. I say, hey, I'm there 12 hours, so what do you want me to do? All right. Any other questions? Yes.
Are game broadcasters expected to be like objective about like their team, or like is like Steve Lee, for example, because he works for the Clippers, is he still allowed to root for the Clippers in the broadcast room, or does he have to be?
Good question. It depends on most of all, it depends on your boss. He'll tell you how. And some bosses will just let the announcer do what he wants. In Dayton, there's no question I'm the home team broadcaster. If you listen, you would know for sure which team I want to win. I still make every effort to be fair and accurate in what I'm describing on the field. So if there's a close play and I have access to a replay and our guy was called safe and he should have been called out and I have access to a replay, I'll mention that. But you're going to know for sure which team I'm not. In other words, I'm not doing a network national broadcast where I'm straight down the middle, neutral, impartial. I'm definitely for our team. Nothing wrong with that in my opinion. Try not to be overly critical. You get emotional sometimes when you're with the team every day. Scott would say this, I'm sure. You have to be careful. You get upset with a player that keeps making the same mistake over and over, and you have to be able to maintain a professional handle on your emotions and not be too critical. In the minor leagues, one of the things that keeps you kind of in line is, again, with internet, every player on the field's mom and dad and girlfriend and hometown fans are listening every night, and he's going to hear everything you say. So if you said something that you really couldn't back up, he's going to ask you about it the next day. I had that happen one time years ago. We had a player that made a mistake on the field, I thought, and it was a play where I just didn't think he gave his best effort, and I just raked him over the coals on the radio. Just absolutely raked him over the coals for not giving his best effort and hustling. And I found out after the game that the umpire had actually made a call, and it was what we call a dead ball at the time, meaning the play was actually not live, so there was no need for him to really be hustling. I didn't know that. I didn't see the umpire make that call. And I made a conscious decision at that time. I thought to myself, in the future and from this point forward, if I'm ever going to criticize a player, it's going to be something that's indisputable, something no one can come back to me on and say, you were wrong. It's going to be something that's indisputable. Something that no one can argue with me on. And if that's the case and the player doesn't give his best effort, then I got no problem saying that on the air. But to answer your question, certainly I'm not totally impartial. I'm not completely neutral. But I try to be fair and accurate with the things I say as well. Any other questions?
Tom, would that style change if you're at the major league level where you're not just dealing with 17, 18, 19-year-old players who
Probably.
are going to make mistakes? You're dealing with someone who is a Golden Glover and been in the league for 10 years. You might be more critical?
Probably. Again, I think a lot of it ties back into your boss. Any job you have, the most important influence on what you do is the guy that's signing your paycheck. If he doesn't like what you're doing, you're going to stop getting that paycheck. So when I came to Dayton, there were 3 or 4 sort of red flags that they put in front of me and said, we don't really care whether you've done this in the past anywhere or what you think about it or whether you think it's right or wrong, but this is the way it's going to be. If you want to work here, don't talk about this or don't say this on the air. And I said, okay, it's your team. Whether I agree with that or not, that's the way we're going to do the games. So if I got to Cincinnati or somewhere else and they said, well, here's the way we want you to be in that area, that's the way I would be. So if it's left up to me, and you can watch NFL football broadcasts, I think, and see exactly what I'm talking about sometimes. You'll get to points where you'll say, why do the announcers, I've noticed the last 3 or 4 weeks, the announcers, they don't really criticize the officials anymore at all. And I'm thinking, you know what? The NFL sent out a memo to the Fox and CBS play-by-play guys and said, lay off the refs. You guys are getting too critical of the officials. And again, so if you want to keep that job, what do? You lay off the refs. That's the way it works sometimes. Any job you have, that's going to be the case with rules.
Tom, you see a lot of young people coming out of various colleges, setting resumes, applications. Do you note some schools have produced stronger, if you will,
Absolutely.
grads than perhaps others, without being critical of those that?
Right. Absolutely.
Are there some schools that these students might be looking at to enhance their skills?
Let's see. I've hired 8 assistants in the 8 years I've been here. Really 7, because the first year I was here, the assistant just carried over. See, of those 7 I've hired, I think 4 have been products of Syracuse University in New York. That has a tremendous broadcast program. So 4 of the 7 that I've hired have been graduates of Syracuse University. They call it the Newhouse School of Broadcasting there. Their students are really well prepared when they come out. They're broadcasters. And so I've usually had a Syracuse student on my list of finalists each year. I'm a little out of practice here voice-wise. I haven't done a game for 2 months. Anyway, so that's the answer. And this past year, our guy was a UD student. I've had, let's see, the other guys just had different levels of experience. Again, experience is important. If you've got experience, for me, when I'm looking for an assistant, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pop his tape in and listen to it. If he doesn't sound good on the air, it's going to take me about 10 seconds to realize that. And his tape's going to be popped out, and he's not going to have a chance. Once he passes that first test, I'm going to start looking at his resume closely and see his experience and thinking to myself, okay, how much am I really going to have to train this guy in the real basic areas? If he doesn't know the most basic things, I'm going to spend all my time training him before we can even really get to what we need to get to. So I look at his resume and I see what experience level does he have. And that's important too. What skills does he have? What computer programs does he know how to operate? Again, Photoshop, InDesign, those are 2 that we use. If he's got that, that's a plus.
Now, I know you mentioned he.
Right.
And I know there are various jobs. Is
Right.
the on-air voice for the Dragons or minor league baseball, is that a glass ceiling that ladies have not cracked yet?
Not at all. In fact, this season, ESPN, Sunday Night Baseball, national telecast. That's right. That's right. you know what? She did a good job.
She did.
So it's been male dominated, no question about it. It's not the easiest thing to crack, but it can be done, as has been proven. There are some, in our case, there are some adjustments that would have to be made, but those can be made. Adjustments that would have to be made, for example, the broadcaster goes into the locker room every day.
Oh, God, no.
And so you'd have to figure something out there. So that's part of it.
One of the New York Yankees radio broadcasters,
Yep.
Susie Waldman.
That's right.
Any final questions?
Yes.
Has like anyone in your family ever done the same thing?
No one had. Father was a fireman.
Good job.
Mother was a bookkeeper for the county highway department. I was the first person in my family to enter college. So they all, after me, they all did. I was the oldest in my family, and so no one had any experience in this. Something I made up my mind and said, I'm doing that, and nobody's going to stop me.
You the only child?
I've got younger brothers and sisters, but I was the first. And that's really what you have to do. If you've got, again, that's why I put ambition as number one. You've got to pick something to be successful. You've got to want it more than anybody else. Be willing to sacrifice. There's going to be sacrifices. When I was in college, again, I'm working in a radio station on Thanksgiving Day, Christmas Day, days that the full-time guys get days off, but we've got to, somebody's got to keep the station on the air. You're going to make sacrifices, but in the long run, if you want it enough, it'll be worth it. And you'll look back on that and say, I paid my dues and paid the price, and here I am.